This is Chair, a place where we discuss innovations. By 2015, it's estimated that it's going to be 9 billion people in the world, and most of those people are going to live in urban areas. Because of that, now more than ever, it's important to talk about smart city innovation or smarter city innovations. So I have a great pleasure today to welcome Miloš Milosavljević, founder and CEO of Strawberry Energy. Miloš is visionary, started to work on a smart city innovations even before the term became valid. Usually every interview, every conversation with you start with a question about why is the strawberry. So I don't want to ask that question, I will answer it first and you will tell me if it's good. So you wanted to create a symbol, something new, something fresh. So you decided with the strawberry because it's the first fruit that reap in spring, right? And because of that, you became the symbol, the strawberry became the symbol of the courage, to be first, to be owner of the new era. So Miloš, welcome to Chair, and I hope that I told the strawberry story good.
Yes, you did actually. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And actually, you helped a lot. Yeah, this is probably the most frequent question we get wherever we go, regardless of the industry. Of the topic is why strawberries. So this.
Well, probably you did a great thing with that name, right?
Yeah, I think we love our name. It's a very unique. It's very innovative. It's very fresh. Everybody loves it, and literally, like I think that of course, like. The most important thing is what you do, but of course the name also can help, and I think we had a great success with like strawberries, especially that it's a little bit counterintuitive. Like when you just hear strawberry, it's not something that like easily comes into mind when you think about smart city innovation. So I think it actually probably added a little bit on the brand image in itself that we have such a cool name.
How to come to the idea to innovate something that is so old and I can easily say so dull as sitting a bench?
Exactly. So when you look actually when we look around ourselves, it's there's a bunch of things that actually didn't change much. So we kind of like all of these things came to us fairly spontaneously. So we didn't had an idea to reinvent the bench in itself, even though that's we ended up doing. Our kind of main idea was to try to use solar energy to help in some kind of everyday life scenarios. And back in the day when we started Strawberry, it was early like 2011 or something like that. I was still in school. I was still studying electrical engineering in Belgrade. And I was fascinated with solar energy and its potential, and it was far more forward-looking than it is today. Of course, today everybody knows about it. Back in the day, it was still kind of a early thing, cutting edge, something.
It was expensive, right?
It was expensive, but not just, yes, it was expensive, exactly. It was 10 times more expensive than it is today. But the thing is, the solar panels was something that you would see in a Star Wars movies, you know, like it's not something that you would see around yourself. So we kind of, like I was fascinated with the question, how actually we can bring this cool technology into everyday life so that people can actually see it, can benefit out of it. And in the same time, it was early days of smartphone revolution in general. So the iPhone just came out a couple of years before that. So the civilization started basically moving toward this kind of smartphone lifestyle, where actually more and more of your daily routine and your life became dependent on a smartphone. So the smartphones basically started consuming more and more of your digital life. So those two major trends, let's say, kind of converged, and then we said actually we can use solar energy to recharge smartphones. That was kind of our original idea. So it was not kind of the idea, okay, you see this bench, nobody kind of reinvented the bench for 1,000 years, which is actually the case. But it was actually, the bench just happened to be a wonderful medium for what we wanted to do, and that was to kind of use solar energy to help kind of educate people, to help promote the sustainability, eco-friendly approach of life. And we ended up basically reinventing the bench in a way that we never kind of originally aimed for.
Can you share with our viewers what's the next thing from you guys? Because first was the tree, right?
Yes.
Now bench.
Yes. So basically, we kind of, as you said in the intro, the strawberry started way before the smart cities was a thing. Of course, today you can hear smart cities wherever you want, and it's a huge topic. But we kind of established ourselves as a smart city tech company, so basically a technology company that works in a smart cities area, with the main goal to help improve public spaces. That's kind of our mission so far. And if you think in those terms, it's very easy to kind of see huge opportunities around yourself. So as we mentioned, as you correctly mentioned, when you look around yourself, our cities actually didn't change much. Of course, like the technology changed a lot of our lives in for example, like the PC revolution, smart homes, electric cars, smart cars, all of these things changed. But when it comes to the public spaces and kind of street furniture, almost nothing changed. So basically,
buildings are still the same, and
pretty much the buildings are still the same, but the street furniture is almost identical. So like the benches are the same as they were 1,000 years ago. A street light is the same pretty much like it was 50 or 1,000 years ago. Payphones are same as they were 50 years ago when they were introduced. So trash cans are the same as they were, I guess, 1,000 years ago, if they existed in that form. So basically nothing much changed. And we actually just saw a huge amount of opportunity in those things, because they're quite every single. So public spaces is the only thing that actually all of 7 billion people share. Your private home is your private space, but actually the only common thing for all of us on the planet are our public spaces. Parks, streets, squares, campuses, you name it. And they're full of these pieces of street furniture that actually occupy huge amount of spaces, in some cases very, very busy, very popular, very kind of iconic places. And they can actually provide way more value than they do today. So we kind of just focused on actually how we can provide more value to an urban citizen, to urban lifestyle, by reinventing street furniture. We started with the bench because the bench was probably the most common piece of street furniture, or at least the most common piece of social street furniture. You probably have more street lights in the world, but you don't engage as a person, you don't engage with them. So we started with the benches, reinvented the bench, and we can jump into that further. But and then now we're looking at other things. As we speak, we are working on a smart payphone. The idea was to while the benches are still useful in the same way they were 100 years ago, payphones became completely obsolete. I don't know any country, maybe of course, at least any European and Western countries, that actually where anybody use a payphone, public payphone. But in a majority of countries, you still have them. So we wanted to kind of use that old obsolete infrastructure to convert them into something useful, something for the 21st century. So we are now working, we actually showcased this year, in June, we showcased the first prototype of the smart payphone, which was effectively like a digital touchscreen hub, urban hub, where you will have a variety of apps basically, and applications relevant to the urban environment. The things to help you explore the city, to provide relevant information, to provide emergency information, to suggest good local places, tourist info, the places where you can buy a parking ticket, you can book a table in the nearby restaurant, anything that can help you improve your urban experience.
I usually always ask a question to leader who I'm having here and share about the vision and the future. And I'm sure that you, especially recently, heard so many questions what is going to be with the smart or smarter cities. So I don't want to ask you about that. I want to ask you to give me some specific innovation that you think that will influence smart cities in the future, that will influence life itself.
Yeah, so there's, as you said, smart city is a huge area, and it's very hard to kind of say what will be the most kind of impactful. And there is a lot of things happening from literally transport, waste management, security, everything literally basically goes into the smart city umbrella. I think that the amount of innovation will be so huge in this area of living that we call smart cities, that it's probably going to be similar to what happened with PC industry maybe like 50 years ago. I like to say when I explain to people like where is our industry now, because not many people think about smart cities. It's still an early stage industry, early phase of the industry. I like to say to them that the smart cities as an industry is still so early age that it's maybe similar like PC industry was in 76. So it's there, but it's just the beginning. So it's everybody still trying to kind of figure out what's the best way to how they can do and what it can actually develop into. I think, for example, that when it comes to the urban life, one of the important areas, even though that Strawberry is not working on that at the moment, I think that, for example, transport is super important. And one of my personal favorites is self-driving car. I think that self-driving as a technology will have a huge impact in how we live in urban lifestyle in so many ways that we probably can, like that kind of like average person who is not kind of in tech probably still don't think about. But driving is so essential to us, and we kind of learned that it's necessary, that it's going to kind of change huge amount of things. It will, for example, just imagine like you will be able to sleep maybe. So if you commute today, like I do, maybe like half an hour or 1 hour to work, it's a waste of time. Basically something that it's a huge waste of time. And even in small countries like Serbia or Belgrade, but you can imagine in Los Angeles or in any kind of bigger place where you can be stuck in the traffic for hours and hours every single day. So liberation of this time for people that self-driving technology will kind of give is going to be amazing, because you'll be able to, for example, sleep 2 hours more. Or you'll be able to maybe work 6 hours instead of 8, because you'll be able to work in commute as well, even if you have to go to the office, which Corona, of course, now changed the public opinion of is it necessary to go to the office. You will be able to send the car to pick up your kids from school, to drive them to their piano lesson or to their sports. So you as a kind of average person will be hugely impacted in a way that then the less congestion on the street will mean healthier air in a higher urban density areas. It will mean less space dedicated to cars, more space dedicated to walking, to parks, to any kind of more human interaction. So I think that, for example, even though that it's not something maybe that you would necessarily think of a smart city technology, for example, self-driving car will change how the city looks and how we live within the city. So it will be far more, for example, acceptable to live maybe one hour or 1.5 hours from a city center in some kind of quiet place, because every day when you commute to the office, you'll be able to sleep, read, watch a movie, do something that otherwise you cannot do because you have to drive.
Yeah, it will change the quality of life itself.
I think it will be, I think it will hugely, and probably then it will also impact for example, prices, because it's not going to be necessary to live in a center, for example, anymore. So then people will be able to live in other places. I think it's going to change a lot of things.
I want to go back to Strawberry itself and the things that you do, because in your core it's innovation. Yeah. And I want you to share with me of your innovation process, or how you make the decision that are innovation based.
Yeah, so we don't have, so there is probably a lot of ways to think about that. We always try to focus on a user. In our case, it's a person. So we design and manufacture street furniture that's designed for people to use in public spaces. So we always think from that kind of perspective, like what is it that you need, that a person need in a city environment, in urban environment that you don't have at the moment, or you don't have enough, or you don't have enough places that actually we can develop or bring to you by using any of the modern technologies available today. So we will like to think that, at least my kind of personal view is that technology is the best when it's invisible. So we don't like to think in terms of, okay, technology is good for technology's sake. We think that technology is good for people's sake. So we try not to think of innovation from a technical point of view. Okay, what do we have here? What we can do with this? Which is usually the engineering way of looking at things. Engineers, which I'm also an engineer, but engineers usually are so fascinated with the technology itself that they are trying to see, they came across some very cool technology, and then they try to innovate something from that technology that they can maybe push to people. That's okay, maybe in some cases it makes sense, but far more kind of natural and I think useful way is to go to the basic needs and then to try to innovate from there. So, for example, in that case, we spoke a lot with we look at the benches, for example, as a platform in a way that we have two main resources relevant in the 21st century. It's energy and it's internet, which enables us to build on top of that. So now we are developing a lot of features for the benches that we can provide to people. But we are always trying to look in a way like what are the needs that people have that maybe we can answer to. And we always try to innovate from that point versus, okay, we have this cool new technology, let's think let's see how we can push it to the market. Although that's also a common example, but I think the user-centric is more relevant. Like that's the way how you help people the best way and how you focus more easily, more efficiently your time and energy in the development phase.
I didn't want to mention COVID and everything, but you mentioned it earlier. So
still 2020.
Yeah, we are still in 2020, but I think this show is going to be 2021.
Yeah.
But let's finally finish up. I will ask you a question about COVID because it influenced so much more, so many things, right?
Yeah.
And first businesses, and especially in that part, we are talking about public spaces and everything. There is less people there and everything. How COVID influenced your business, and what you needed to do to buffer that thing that happened with COVID?
So basically, the COVID situation influenced a huge amount of industries. Of course, some much more than others. Our industry was influenced a lot as well. As you can imagine, it's not a life-saving stuff what we do. In a way that if you have such a big urgency like you had now with COVID and everything, almost all public life, or at least for a huge portion of the time, slow down. With all of these quarantines, with all of these kind of work from home, stay home orders, less people spend time outside, which of course then resulted in less activities, resulted in kind of what we do with the public spaces in smart cities in general, just not completely disappearing, but becoming a second or third or you name it priority. So it just fell down on a priority list. But again, if you're speaking about entrepreneurship, every crisis is an opportunity. At least you need to look at it that way. That basically in some cases it's doing more of the same. In some cases it's doing something different. We tried almost to we from the day one, we thought about how we can actually maybe adapt, what we can do, how we can change. But considering that we are in a business that's not necessarily easy to super change everything from scratch, what we ended up kind of succeeding the most, we added, of course, some kind of messages and communication on the benches and everything all across. But business-wise, we just realized, for example, and this is just a Strawberries case, but I think you can learn, you can take some kind of, you can have some takeaways from there. Majority of our clients basically halted their activities. So we had a huge pipeline for 2020, but majority of those things just got frozen in March when all of this happened. So we then tried to just focus on what are the new opportunities that emerged like a consequence of the COVID situation. And what we learned effectively was that hospitals became overcrowded all of a sudden, and in a very unique and different way. We never thought much about hospital public spaces, although they do have them. But now in COVID, and that's kind of true all around the world, all of the hospitals became full. And regardless of did you have an issue with COVID or any other issue that you would go to the hospital anyway, they all became full. And because of these, of course, the situation with COVID, it was forbidden to go inside unless you are the patient or it's your turn. So all of a sudden, public spaces in front of the hospitals became crowded. And majority of those places didn't have enough even space to accommodate these people, not even more to kind of add some useful services relevant to those places. So that we realized that now actually you do need, while maybe you do not need at the moment much sitting places in parks, you actually do need them in the hospitals, in front of the hospitals, because people were queuing outside. And we just then started focusing more on these kind of areas. And we had a great success, for example, where we focused on these areas. We started working with any kind of medical centers that we were able to kind of approach. And we had almost 100% kind of yes rate to whoever we spoke to. And we started adding much more these infrastructure, basically smart benches to the public spaces around hospitals to help people who were there take more information, have a place to sit, charge their phones if they need to, or do any kind of this, have a free public Wi-Fi. And that's how, for example, that's the area that kind of we saw the biggest growth. So although, of course, we still had a growth in this year, it came from a completely unexpected side that we kind of adopted to as a COVID kind of consequence. So it's probably not necessarily true for every single market you can think of, but I believe that these open up new opportunities. There is a fantastic example of one of our friends, basically from the UK, who they were in a similar area. They were creating these charging places for coffee shops where you can charge. When you're in a coffee shop, you can charge your phone. These boxes,
like boxes
kind of those things, yeah. Similar. And then they started providing hand dispensers for disinfection, and because everybody needs them. Their clients basically needed them all of a sudden because they were working a lot with these kind of indoor spaces. So they started working on that, and they had a huge success by basically just changing effectively phone charging for hand cleaning, because all of their clients needed them. So I think that these, as maybe just goes in without saying, this was a new opportunity in which I hope at least every single business was able to somehow change their approach, change their market, change maybe how they do things, and grab the new opportunity. Of course, maybe it's not the same for everybody, but this was a crisis. The new crisis will be again in probably different shapes and forms. But as an entrepreneur, you always need to kind of keep your eyes open for the next big opportunity.
Great. So I wanna finish with some more personal question to you.
Yeah.
Since I know that you're somebody that loves to read, and we talked earlier before this show, and you told me you're going to retreat to read some books.
Yeah.
So I want you to give me some idea. What was the best books of 2020 for you, and maybe what are you planning to read first in 2021?
Those are good questions. So basically, because there's also I'm always not happy with the amount of time I dedicate to reading, because there is so much good things to read in books, in magazines, in articles, on you name it. Like there's a medium, podcasts. So basically, it's all some kind of content consumption. I'm always unhappy with the amount of time I can dedicate on a daily basis. So I decided for this kind of I think I borrowed that concept from Gates. Bill Gates is an avid reader. So I heard somewhere that every year he was retreating to the mountains, literally to the cabin without any kind of connectivity, anything really, with a ton of books because he was so busy during the regular days to read, that he would kind of accumulate everything and go for a week or two to read. So I'm trying to kind of use that trick to see if it's going to help. I'm going to take with me a mix of some kind of business / kind of professional books, and a little bit of kind of things for just for fun to read. The best books that I read this year, it's hard to recommend, of course, because everybody has different interests. But one of the books that had a very, very kind of good, feel-good kind of attitude was The Ride of a Lifetime from Bob Iger, CEO of Disney. Basically, it's an autobiography where he described his life from literally becoming the lowest level employee, a boy who kind of drags the cables around the studio, to becoming the CEO of Disney. So he spent kind of one way or another his whole life in Disney. So it's a very nice and I think inspiring, where we can kind of learn from these kind of people how they look, what are their attitude to work, to problems, how they behave, what made them who they are. So that was probably the most kind of feel-good book I read this year. I'm planning to read Harari, the whole 3 books, which is Sapiens, Homo Deus, and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I'm kind of bringing it with me all the time this year, but I never had a chance to finish. I think that's kind of very popular, very, very trendy, and I'm planning to read them. There's also a very good, I'm usually reading the books by recommendations. I'm kind of always
that's why I asked you, actually.
Yeah, so I'm planning to read also Life 3.0. It's a book about kind of the future of civilization and everything, but in a very practical way, not in some kind of philosophical way. I'm planning to read also Thinking Fast and Slow, which is, I think, also a book to basically help you improve your way of thinking and kind of learn more how to think productively and fast and strategically good enough. And the latest thing I'm going to probably take with me that I want to read is the book that actually also Gates recommended just a few days ago, about the title is a little bit kind of not very relevant to the book, so and it's long, so I didn't kind of remember the whole title, but the book is about leadership. It's about World War II and how the Britain how Churchill came to power, and how he actually made his team, and how they went through the Blitzkrieg, the Battle for Britain. No, actually, Battle for Britain, the bombing, air bombing of the London, where I think it's kind of, again, it's in the real world. It's not a fiction. It's kind of some kind of maybe a biography / history book, but focused on this kind of leadership principles and everything, like how they turned the destiny and the outcome of the Battle for Britain. So I think that's kind of the thing I read, or I'm going to read hopefully in the next month.
Milos, thank you so much for this conversation. I enjoyed
Thank
extremely.
You. Thank you.
For you guys there, if you liked today's episode and want to hear more about some other innovations, please subscribe and see you next Thursday.
Thank you. Pleasure.